John Denver's here to brag a little.
Yes, Patty, I shot a 79 today.
All right.
It's so
John Denver was loved around the world for his warm voice and touching songs. But behind the spotlight was a life filled with heartbreak and mystery. As fans celebrated his music, they missed the secrets tied to his abandoned home, 2 wives, 3 children, and the tragic ending he never saw coming. Join us as we uncover the mind-blowing details about John Denver. Abandoned house. John Denver's home in Aspen, Colorado, was more than just a place to live. It was a reflection of his love for nature and music. Built in 1972, this residence was more than just a house. It was a reflection of Denver's soul. But after his tragic death, the home slowly lost its life. Once filled with music, laughter, and light, it now rests in so much silence. Over the years, the property changed hands, and by 2016, it had fallen into disrepair. Dennis and Kelly O'Donovan, fans of Denver's music since childhood, saw the potential in this neglected gem and purchased it for $2.75 million. Upon acquisition, the O'Donovans faced a daunting task. The house required extensive renovations, including overhauls of the plumbing, electrical systems, and roofing. Instead of opting for demolition, they chose to preserve the home's original charm. They retained features like the stained glass installations, solid walnut cabinetry, and wood-burning fireplaces, which echoed Denver's artistic spirit. The renovation was a labor of love, taking 2 years to complete. The couple collaborated with architect Jeffrey Hancox and interior designer Winnie Coleman to blend modern aesthetics with the home's rustic character. They introduced contemporary elements such as a vaulted kitchen ceiling and expansive windows to capture the breathtaking views of Aspen's 4 renowned mountains, which are Aspen Mountain, Aspen Highlands, Buttermilk, and Snowmass. The transformation extended beyond the interiors. The O'Donovans enhanced the outdoor spaces, adding decks and a stone fire pit, creating a harmonious balance between the home and its natural surroundings. Their efforts culminated in a residence that felt both like a modern retreat and a tribute to Denver's legacy. And in 2019, the revitalized home was listed for $11 million, attracting attention not just for its luxurious amenities, but also for its connection to the beloved singer-songwriter. It was not only his house that stirred up people's curiosity, his personal life also did. Keep watching to know why it was that way. Denver's wives and children. This kind of lifestyle that raised people's curiosity all started in 1967, when he got married for the first time. His wife was Annie Martell, a young woman from St. Peter, Minnesota. Annie was deeply important to him, and he even wrote a song about her that became one of his most famous. He created the song while sitting on a ski lift in Colorado, and it only took him about 10 minutes to finish it. That's how strongly he felt about her. The couple lived in Edina, Minnesota for a few years, from 1986 until 1971. Later, when one of his songs inspired by nature and the mountains became a huge hit, he decided to make a big change. The song, born out of a camping trip he took with Annie and some close friends, was a reflection of his love for the outdoors. After its success, he bought a home in Aspen, Colorado, where he stayed for the rest of his life. John and Annie couldn't have kids naturally, so they opened their hearts and adopted 2 children. They named the boy Zachary John and the girl Anna Kate. John felt a deep connection with them and often spoke about how they were meant to be his children. He believed that being their dad was the most beautiful thing about his life. For him, just being remembered as their father was more than enough. It brought him real joy and pride. His love for his son even led to another touching song. He wrote a Christmas tune that included Zachary's name in it, and he actually wrote it for Frank Sinatra. That song showed just how much he loved his little boy. But even though their love was once strong, John and Annie ended up going their separate ways in 1982. When they talked about the breakup, both had their reasons. John believed his busy career and packed schedule created too much distance between them. Annie, on the other hand, felt they were too young and didn't really know how to handle all the fame and change that came so quickly. The divorce wasn't easy. In fact, John did something really shocking during that time. To make a statement about how they were dividing everything between them, he actually took a chainsaw and cut their bed in half. That moment showed just how painful and dramatic the split had become. But it wasn't long. John Denver tied the knot for the second time in 1988. This time, he married Cassandra Delaney, an actress from Australia, after they had been in a relationship for 2 years. They decided to live together in John's house in Aspen, Colorado, where they built a life and welcomed a baby girl named Jessie Bell. But their happiness didn't last very long. Just a few years later, in 1991, the couple went their separate ways. Their marriage officially ended in the next 2 years. John didn't hide how he felt about how things turned out. So, reflecting on that chapter of his life, he shared that during their brief time together, Cassandra had embarrassed him in ways that were hard for him to forget. He felt like she had made a joke out of him in front of everyone around them, from one side of the valley to the other. That pain clearly left a mark on him. Connecting all these visible signs, this might be part of the reasons that made their marriage not to last. The world thought that this was the only heartbreaking thing in Devner's life, until the news of his death, which brought a lot of things to light. The tragic death and the stories behind it. On the afternoon of October 12, 1997, John Denver lost his life in a tragic accident. Devner's death was so painful, but the stories behind it made it more heartbreaking. It happened that he was flying a small aircraft, a Rutan Long EZ, with the registration number N555JD, which he had recently started using. While performing repeated takeoffs and landings near the Monterey Peninsula Airport in California, the plane crashed into the waters of Monterey Bay, close to Pacific Grove. Sadly, he was alone in the aircraft, and the crash was so severe that the cause of death was listed as multiple injuries from the impact. John was no amateur in the skies, because he had spent over 2,700 hours flying and held licenses for flying a wide range of aircraft, whether it was single-engine on land and water, multi-engine planes, gliders, or flying using only instruments. He even had a license specific to flying a Learjet. The plane involved in the crash had been recently bought and was built from a kit by someone else. Just a day before the crash, John had done a quick 30-minute test flight to get used to the new aircraft. But despite his flying experience, there was a serious issue because John was not allowed to fly legally at that time. His previous run-ins with alcohol-related offenses had caught up with him. In 1996, almost a year before the crash, the Federal Aviation Administration found out that he hadn't stayed sober as required, and they took away his medical clearance to fly. Still, the investigation later confirmed that alcohol played no part in the accident. His autopsy showed that he had no alcohol or substance in his system when he died. After the crash, the National Transportation Safety Board carried out a detailed investigation. They concluded that the main reason behind the accident was a problem with switching fuel tanks during flight. His aircraft had already used up a good portion of fuel while flying to Monterey, and during the short practice flights he was doing right before the crash. The plane's fuel system was also quite tricky. The switch to change fuel tanks was placed in an odd spot behind his left shoulder, instead of being in front of him where he could reach easily. To make matters worse, the fuel gauge wasn't even visible from the pilot's seat, as it had been installed behind him. An aircraft mechanic who had worked on the plane and spoken with John shared that they had discussed this problem. The two of them had talked about how hard it was to reach the fuel tank switch and how difficult it was to turn it. However, it was this design flaw, combined with the awkward position of the controls, that led to a heartbreaking end for a man who had given so much to the world through his music and spirit. Just before John Denver took off on his final flight, he and the aircraft mechanic had tried to make it easier to reach the fuel selector valve, which was placed in a difficult spot. They tried using a pair of vise grip pliers to make the handle longer, hoping it would solve the issue. But even after doing that, it was still out of reach once Denver was strapped tightly into his seat. The mechanic later shared that switching the fuel tanks during flight required a very uncomfortable movement, which means that John would have had to twist his body almost completely around, turning 90 degrees just to reach the valve. And while doing that, it was natural to push hard with the right foot on the right rudder pedal to stay balanced, which made the plane veer off to the right and rise slightly. The mechanic had also told John that the small windows used to check fuel levels were only visible from the rear seat, so John had asked him how much fuel was left. The mechanic replied there was less than half in the right tank and less than a quarter in the left. To help him out, he handed John a small inspection mirror so he could try to look back at the gauges during the flight. That same mirror was later found among the wreckage. John said he planned to use the autopilot to keep the plane steady while he reached back to change the fuel tank. When someone offered to refuel the plane before the flight, John had declined, explaining that the trip would only take about an hour. As investigators tried to understand exactly what went wrong, the National Transportation Safety Board spoke with 20 people who had seen parts of John's final flight. Out of those, 6 said they actually saw the crash happen near Point Pinos. 4 remembered the plane heading toward the west. And then, 5 said the aircraft was sharply tilted, with 4 confirming that the turn was toward the right side, which pointed north. 12 of the witnesses said the plane had gone into a steep dive with its nose pointed down. They guessed that the plane was flying between 350 to 500 feet above the ground as it moved closer to the shoreline. 8 of them described hearing a loud sound, either a pop or a backfire, right before the engine's noise dropped and the aircraft slammed into the water. The final report didn't just stop at blaming John for not adding more fuel or for losing control while trying to reach the selector valve. The safety board pointed to other serious concerns too. One major problem was that John didn't get proper training for flying that specific kind of homemade aircraft. Another was the poor design choice by the person who built the plane, especially putting the fuel selector handle in such a hard-to-reach spot. Because of everything they uncovered, the board pushed for stronger rules. They recommended that pilots who fly homemade aircraft must go through proper training, because it was lack of proper training that made the world lose a valued person. His net worth at the time of his death. At the time of his death in 1997, John Denver's net worth was estimated at $60 million, amassed through his successful music career, including the release of 33 albums and nearly 300 songs, as well as his ventures into acting and environmental activism. Despite his wealth, Denver died without a valid will, leading to a 6-year legal process to settle his estate. He had established 7 million trusts for his parents, ex-wife Annie Martell, and each of his 3 children. But the absence of a will complicated the distribution of his assets. The IRS disputed the estate's valuation, claiming it was understated by $2.5 million and sought $1.5 million in back taxes. Eventually, the estate was divided among his children, ex-wife, and charitable causes he supported, which even added more to his legacy. But to get a full knowledge about his legacy, you need to keep watching. Remembering John Denver. Right after the heartbreaking news of John Denver's passing was made public, the governor of Colorado, Roy Romer, paid tribute by ordering every flag across the state to be flown at half-mast. It was a sign of deep respect for a man who had brought so much pride and love to Colorado through his music and legacy. Just a few days later, on October 17, 1997, family, friends, and fans gathered at Faith Presbyterian Church in Aurora, Colorado, to say their goodbyes. The service was led by Pastor Les Felker, a former Air Force chaplain. After the ceremony, John's body was cremated, and in a touching and peaceful final gesture, his ashes were scattered across the Rocky Mountains, which was one of his favorite places and the one he had sung about so many times with love. The honors didn't stop there. In the months that followed, he was remembered warmly during major music events, including the Grammy Awards and the Country Music Association Awards. These moments reminded everyone of the powerful impact his voice and songs had on the world. The next year, in 1998, John was honored with a special award after his death, the Lifetime Achievement Award from the World Folk Music Association. To make sure his legacy lived on, they even created a new award in his name to celebrate other artists who touched lives the way he did. Then, in the year 2000, CBS released a made-for-TV movie called Take Me Home, The John Denver Story, inspired by his personal memoirs. Actor Chad Lowe stepped into John's shoes to tell his life story on screen. However, not everyone was impressed. The New York Post commented that someone as driven and talented as John Denver couldn't possibly have lived a life that dull, hinting that the film didn't capture the full color and energy of his journey. That same year, on April 22nd, something very touching happened. At Hawk Mountain Sanctuary in Kempton, Pennsylvania, a special bench was placed as a way to remember John Denver. It was set up thanks to generous donations and was unveiled just in time for Earth Day, which was a perfect tribute considering how deeply he cared for nature. The bench found its home at the South Lookout Point, a peaceful spot where people could sit, reflect, and feel connected to the earth, much like John had always encouraged. Nearly a decade after the accident that claimed his life, something deeply emotional took place. On September 23, 2007, John's brother Ron stood near the place where the crash happened in Pacific Grove, California. He watched quietly as a plaque was placed there, honoring the memory of a man who had meant so much to so many. Even now, years after his passing, people still seek out pieces of him. His old television specials, especially the one-hour shows from the 1970s and his six-part series made for the BBC titled The John Denver Show, have become prized treasures. Fans hunt for DVD copies like they're rare gems because they hold the spirit of a time when John's music and smile lit up living rooms across the world. In 2006, a musical collection called Back Home Again, a John Denver holiday, opened at the Rubicon Theater Company. The show was built around his songs and brought his message of love, warmth, and home to the stage all over again, stirring up memories and emotions among longtime fans and new listeners alike. Then, something very meaningful happened again on March 12, 2007. The Colorado Senate made a decision that felt long overdue. They voted to officially recognize John Denver's famous 1972 song Rocky Mountain High as one of the state's two official anthems. It now shares that honor with Where the Columbines Grow. The resolution made it through the House with a vote of 50 to 11, although there was a little pushback from one representative who thought the line "Everybody's High" could be misunderstood as referencing substance. But the main sponsor, Senator Bob Hagedorn, made it clear that the song wasn't about that at all. It was about the joy and wonder people feel when they're out in nature, soaking in the breathtaking mountain views of Colorado. Senator Nancy Todd spoke from the heart, saying that to her, John Denver was the very symbol of what Colorado stands for. Then, on September 24, 2007, something beautiful and heartfelt happened along the coast of California. The California Friends of John Denver, together with the WinStar Foundation, placed a bronze plaque close to the area where his small plane had gone down years earlier. At first, the spot was simply marked with a piece of driftwood, carved lovingly with John Denver's name by an artist named Jeffrey Pine. But since the ocean tides could easily carry it away, people started pushing for something lasting, something that would stay forever to honor him. It wasn't easy at first. The local council in Pacific Grove had turned down the idea of a permanent memorial. They were worried that it might attract overzealous fans who could turn the site into a spectacle. But after some time in 1999, they finally gave their approval. Still, things paused again, and this time it was because John's own family asked for it. So, the timing had to feel right. Eventually, everything came together. More than 100 of his closest friends and family showed up for the dedication of the new plaque. It wasn't just any plaque. It held a raised image of John's face and featured moving words from one of his songs, Wind Song, that talked about embracing the wind and listening to the wisdom it carries. It was a soft, meaningful message, just like John always was. To honor 10 years since he passed, his family gave fans a very special gift. They released a 2-disc set of his never-before-heard live performances from 1985 in the Soviet Union. These were concerts he had performed during a rare trip, and the recordings had been tucked away, forgotten for a time, until they were found again in 2002. With the help of producer Roger Nichols and AAO Music, the album was finally ready, titled John Denver, Live in the USSR. It held music from 11 shows, including something incredibly special, a version of Annie's song that John had sung in Russian. The collection became available to everyone on November 6, 2007, bringing his voice back to life and touching hearts all over again. Then, after 2 years, fans of John Denver got something truly special, a brand new collection of his live shows that had never been shared before. This massive 5-disc DVD set, put together by Eagle Rock Entertainment, was called Around the World Live. Live. It gave viewers a front-row seat to 3 full concerts where John performed with his band, one in Australia from 1977, another in Japan from 1981, and a third in England from 1986. On top of that, the set also included a soft, intimate solo acoustic show he did in Japan in 1984, plus powerful performances from Farm Aid in 1985, 1987, and 1990. And to make it even more meaningful, the last disc had 2 full-length documentaries that John had created himself, offering fans a deeper, personal look into his journey. Then, on April 21, 2011, John Denver made history once again. He became the very first artist to be welcomed into the Colorado Music Hall of Fame. The celebration was full of joy and music, held at the First Bank Center in Broomfield. It was hosted by Olivia Newton-John, and the stage was filled with performances from incredible artists like the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band, Leanne Womack, and John Oates. Both of John's former wives came to honor him that evening, and his 3 children accepted the award on his behalf, surrounded by love and applause. Long before that, in 2002, fans had already come together to fund something truly heartfelt, a bronze statue titled The John Denver Spirit, crafted by sculptor Sue DeChico. The statue found its forever home at Red Rocks Amphitheater, where the Colorado Music Hall of Fame resides. It stands as a lasting tribute to the man who brought so much beauty into the world through his songs. Then came another sweet moment on March 7, 2014. In West Virginia, lawmakers voted to make Take Me Home Country Roads the official state song. The next day, the state's governor, Earl Ray Tomblin, made it official by signing it into law. This special recognition placed John in a very rare group. Only he and Stephen Foster have ever written 2 songs that became official state anthems. And just when it seemed his legacy couldn't shine any brighter, on October 24, 2014, John Denver was honored with a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame in Los Angeles. And this looked like the highlight of his legacy. You might be wondering what exactly he did to deserve all of these. Well, let's take a step back to how everything started. John Denver, born Henry John Deutschendorf Jr. on December 31, 1943 in Roswell, New Mexico, came from a military family. His mother, Irma Louise, and father, Captain Henry John Dutch Deutschendorf Sr., had a unique, often challenging life. His father was a decorated pilot who set airspeed records in the 1960s. Growing up under the strict influence of a military father, Denver's family moved frequently, and this lifestyle left him struggling to connect with others. As a child, he found it hard to make friends, often feeling like he didn't belong. Denver's family settled in Tucson, Arizona for several years when he was between 6 and 14 years old. During this time, he attended Mansfeld Junior High School and even joined the Tucson, Arizona Boys Chorus, where he sang for 2 years. His time in Tucson was one of his happier phases, but things changed when his father was transferred to Maxwell Air Force Base in Montgomery, Alabama. Eventually, the family moved again, this time to Fort Worth, Texas, where Denver finished his high school education at Arlington Heights High School. Denver never fully adjusted to life in Fort Worth, feeling disconnected and unhappy. As a teenager, he became so distressed with the environment that he decided to leave. He took his father's car and drove all the way to California to visit family friends and pursue his dream of becoming a musician. Despite the strictness of his upbringing and his emotional struggles, these experiences helped shape him into the artist he would later become, forging a path that would lead to him becoming one of the most beloved musicians of his time. The career path he chose. At the age of 11, John Denver was given an acoustic guitar by his grandmother, which sparked his musical journey. By the time he reached college, he was skilled enough to perform in local clubs. During his early years in music, Denver made a significant decision. He changed his name. Randy Sparks, the founder of the New Christy Minstrels, suggested that his original last name, Deutschendorf, wouldn't fit well on a marquee. This led Denver to adopt his new stage name, which would soon become famous worldwide. Denver attended Texas Tech University in Lubbock, where he studied architecture and became part of a folk music group called the Alpine Trio. He also joined the Delta Tau Delta fraternity during his time there. However, he eventually decided to leave school in 1963 to pursue his music career. He moved to Los Angeles and began singing in folk clubs, gaining experience influence and connections in the local music scene. After 2 years, Denver joined the Chad Mitchell Trio, replacing the founding member, Chad Mitchell. Over time, the group went through more changes, and they became known as Denver, Boise, and Johnson, with Denver, David Boise, and Michael Johnson at the helm. However, in 1969, Denver left the band to follow his dream of a solo career. He released his first album, Rhymes and Reasons, under RCA Records. Before that album, Denver had recorded a self-produced demo in which he included a song he had written called Babe, I Hate to Go, which would later be renamed Leaving on a Jet Plane. He gave copies of this demo to friends and family as Christmas gifts. Milt O'Kuhn, who had worked with the Chad Mitchell Trio and Peter, Paul, and Mary, became Denver's producer. O'Kuhn brought Jet Plane to Peter, Paul, and Mary, and their version of the song became a huge hit, reaching #1 on the Billboard Hot 100. Although RCA didn't promote Rhymes and Reasons with a major tour, Denver didn't let that stop him. He decided to travel across the Midwest, performing free concerts in local venues like schools, colleges, and coffee houses. He would show up at local radio stations with his guitar and offer to play songs, often gaining some radio airplay in exchange. Some venues allowed him to play for donations, while others allowed him to sell copies of his album after the show. His grassroots approach worked, and he quickly built a loyal fan base that would stay with him for the rest of his career. John Denver's big moment in the U.S. music scene came in 1971 with the release of his album Poems, Prayers, and Promises. That record completely changed the course of his career. One song in particular, Take Me Home Country Roads, became a major hit and climbed all the way to the #2 spot on the Billboard charts. What's surprising is that the first versions of the song had some audio issues. They were actually distorted, but that didn't stop it from winning hearts across the country. Adding to that, he also organized a massive radio campaign starting in Denver, Colorado, to get the song played everywhere. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe, and also click the next video shown on your screen.